Hello and welcome to the Rook's Nest. My name's Alex and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this halftone comic book style material using Redshift. It's loosely based on the semi-recent animated film Spiderman Into the Spider-Verse, but mainly the inspiration for this video was taken from a great tutorial on Greyscale Gorilla's channel. They show you how to build this style of halftone shader using Arnold, which I strongly recommend you check out. There are a few techniques used which don't translate into Redshift at the moment. Nevertheless, those features may be implemented in the future, so it's definitely worth watching. Unfortunately, Redshift isn't quite as robust, as I just said, as Arnold in the node graph edit department, so it's slightly different. There's a few workarounds we can use though to try and achieve a similar look. This isn't a perfect reproduction. If anything, it's a starting point, but it should help point you in a direction of sorts. I'll put links to any of the sources I've used in the description so you can check them out. With that all said, let's get started. So here we are in Cinema 4D. This is the scene we're going to be creating with the texture, or the shader, whatever you like to call it, down here. It's a pretty straightforward scene. I'm not going to show you how to make the whole thing. A couple of background planes, just for the background, with a version of this shader on it. A top light, a fill light, a background light which is just lighting the back plane, a camera which has a protection tag on it so I don't accidentally move it, a projection cam which is casting our dots, our halftone pattern, a Motex object with a bevel deformer on it, just to give it this nice faceted look, which if I turn it off you can see, there you go. I do that because I don't like the way the caps necessarily look on in Cinema 4D, so I just liked it. Full stop. And then a shader ball with another, just a recoloring of the shader on it, and a light control. Now this light control is quite important, as this thing controls how our let me put it in IPR. How our halftone pattern is cast across our texture. As you can see, I move it left to right, shifting those dots, and you can see they're getting larger. They're larger when they're closer in the highlights, and they get smaller as they trail off. Yeah, so if we open up the texture here, it looks quite daunting at first, but I'm going to break it down into two parts. The first part is going to create something called an Alembic Shader, which is driving these ramps where we're taking highlights, midtones, and shadows from to create mats. If I show you what those look like, I just pop this straight. So here's our highlights. There. Here's our midtones. There. And here are our shadows. There. It looks a bit confusing because the white's the dark, but hope you get the picture. Let's reconnect this back up. And the reason we have to make it like this, make this Alembic shader like this, because in Cinema 4D, or in Redshift I mean, you can't create a Alembic shader this way. So you can't just create a rough, no reflection material, leave it that, and just pipe it straight. But you can pipe it straight into surface and you get this nice Alembic. But if you put it into one of these, which is what we really need to do, it will just give you, it will fire you an error. Let's connect that up. You'll see, look, it's just black. It's an illegal shader graph connection. You just can't do it. And until they add that functionality, which apparently is in the works, I read somewhere. Not sure how high priority it is, but we have to do it this way. Let me just delete all that. Pull it back in. Okay, we're good to go. Right, and then the second half is the actual shader part of it, where we take that Alembic and then map onto each bit our dots and our midtones, and we'll go through that at the end. So I'm going to clear out this project a bit, get rid of these textures, and we'll just start afresh, and so you can follow along. Okay, see you in a sec. So Right, here we are, cleared out the scene now. Got no materials or anything, so the first thing to do is to create a material. And let's pop that on our shadable and on our MoText objects. Open up. Right, so here we've got a glossy material, which is not what we want at all. And as I showed you before, we want this rough, no reflection, Alembic matte, but we can't use this. So we're going to delete that. And it goes red. And we're going to drop in a few nodes. Now, I'm just going to put all these down, and then we'll go through them afterwards if there's anything that needs explaining. I don't really personally know too well how these work, but they just do. The first thing we're going to want is a state node to get the state. The second thing we're going to want to put down is a vector subtract. Yep. We're also going to want to drag in, see this, remember I mentioned this light control, which is just a point light, which is going to be driving this shader. So we'll drag that into there. So we've got that. And what we want to get from this, we want to get global position, coordinates, global position, and that's all. And from here we've got the normal, but we also need the ray position. And essentially we're just subtracting from the we're subtracting the ray position from the global position of the light to give us our light vector. I'll move this up here so it's in order. Then we need to normalize that output. So we add a normalize node. Whack that in there. Then we need to multiply our normal with this normalized vector. So to do that, we need a dot product. And we're just going to multiply this normal by this. And now, if we plug that into here, we should get a really basic Alembic shader. There you have it. Which is driven by this light. So if I move this light around, you'll see essentially a really basic shader. Just move it around. Now, let me just sort this out. This mess is bothering. I might just swap these inputs around. Do a bit of housekeeping. There we go. Pop that up there, that down there. Okay. So I mean, we could, to be honest, we could just go from here and then that's it. But what I'd like to do is just make this a bit less hard. You can see it's just like black. There's no black, white. There's no sort of softness to it. So I thought it'd be a good idea to add Ambient Occlusion Map to it. And all we have to do, pop this up here. They've got Ambient Occlusion. First, let's configure this so it looks the way we want it. Samples are fine. Spread. So spread, as you can see, is how soft it is. Now fall off is the distance between contact. So we just want this nice thing. I don't want to do that. Just get this to a nice point. There we go. So I mean, this in itself could make a good Alembic shader. But what we're going to do is we're going to multiply then these two together. So we're going to multiply this shader. We'll multiply this. Because you also see how it gives the nice details in the bits there. With this to give us a kind of mashup of the two. So we just get another multiply node. Oh, wrong one. And I think it's the scalar. And we just input 1, 2, and out there, and we should get a hybrid of the two. There we go. You see how it's just softened up a bit? It's just not as harsh as it was before. Okay, so that's our Alembic shader done. Let's move on to the more fun, artistic part of the tutorial. So we want to add a ramp. We're going to use this to map out our highlights first. Well, let's do three. Let's drag up control, drag, control, drag. There we go. We've got 3 ramps. Now we're going to connect this ramp to this output, and it will look exactly the same as it did if we went straight in here, because this ramp at the moment is not changing our gradient at all. What we do want is we want the highlights. So we're going to just switch this around. Oh no, sorry, my bad. We're going to go like this over here. Just clamp down until we get, there we go, coverage about a quarter of the way up on the black. There you go, so we've got this highlight here. Now we're going to do the same for our midtones on this one. In fact, this one, I'm going to bring this one in here, but then add an extra up here. You know, I've done that the wrong way around. This like this. I'm going to bring this one in here, add a white dot here, and control drag this dot here, just so we get the midtones. That looks looking alright. I mean, we've gone about quarter again, or fifths. There we go. In fact, we don't need that middle one. There you go. We've got this nice gradient here now. Great. So that's our midtone sorted. Now let's do our shadows. I'm going to plug this one in here. Have a look. So this one we need to invert completely and whack this down here so we're getting just our shadows. Now we want a nice, a bit of a gradient in it. We don't want it too harsh. I mean, it seems a bit harsh in places, but I think that'll do for us for now. There we go. So we've got our 3 maps: our highlights, our shadow, our midtones, and our shadows. Now what are we going to do with those? Right, so we need to drive some sort of texture, and we'll use these as mats that control them. Now, the way the Greyscale Gorilla one works in Arnold is using a gradient node in a with a circular gradient. Problem is, I'll show you why we can't do that in this. So if I just get another ramp, and if I switch it to, say, circular, our problem is, even though we can attach this, but we can't actually drive our node. We can make a nice circle, but we can't drive our node via any external means. Like, I can't pump this map into here and have it change the position of this knot to make this. See how it makes, because we can make it smaller and larger, the circle. So unfortunately we can't do that. So, but what we can do is we can use a texture, like a material, a pre-made bunch of circles. So if we get the texture node, drop that in here, and we're going to load in an image. Now, so the first thing we're going to load in is this halftone pattern. Alright, and I'll show you what it looks like. Oh yeah, sorry, that's, oh yeah, there you go. You can see it's got these dots on it, but you can barely see it. But what we're going to do is we're going to drive this, not using the texture tab, but using the camera mapping tab. We're going to load the same texture in, the halftone. The camera we're going to use is this one I've set up under here. Now, weirdly, I mean, I don't know if I'm doing something wrong. But say, so this camera, load it on. You see here now I've got these nice round dots. That's because I've seemed to have tricked thing into thinking with this fake camera. So in perspective mode, you'll see they all get stretched slightly because it's a square texture. But I've got this box selected, which is supposed to keep the aspect ratio the same as the texture, but neither of them make a difference. But what I found is if I switch this camera to Gentleman, which is obviously an unsupported camera projection type, it sort of defaults to this square texture projection. So you will get this error at the bottom, but I mean, it's the only way it seems to work. And what we're going to do is, okay, so how is this going to work? How are we going to make this in any way dynamic or change? So from these ramps, well, actually, first of all, we're going to be color correcting this texture. So if I get a color correct node out, pop the input here and out color here, you'll see that we can control the size of these dots by increasing the contrast here. See, and as we change the gamma, they get smaller. As we lower it, they get large to the point where they go completely black. And that's because these dots, as you see, have a like a gradient. They go from dark to light, dark to light. Now what we're going to do, we're going to drive this gamma mode using this ramp. And the way we do that, I mean, we could just plug it straight in. You see what happens. It's all right. It's the wrong way. It's the wrong way round, but it's okay. So from that, we can either, you know what? I'll just invert it. I'm going to change what I did before. Let's just scalar invert. You know what? Let's not do that. Let's just do what I did. So we know that ranges, let's disconnect this. So we want the range of the gamma from up to it completely disappears, which is about 3.8, all the way down to probably about 0.7. What we're going to do is we need to remap this 0 to 1 to that scale. So the node we're going to use for that is just a change range node. So we can pop this in here. Our old range minimum is fine because we're going from 0 to 1. But our new range different, and we want to flip them around a bit. So in here, I'm going to put in our 0.7. And here I'm going to put in our 3.8. Pop that in there. And oh, it's the wrong one. Our gamma's disappeared. So we need that gamma back. Pop it in the gamma. And there we have it. We've got these dots that go off into the distance. We can adjust this range here to fine-tune our highlights. We can take this down if we want it to be, you know, not if we want to keep more of the little dots in or increase it, but let's just keep it clean for now. Let's go up to, let's just keep it at 3.8. Right, so that's our highlights. Now all we're going to do is the same thing for the midtones. So we might as well just control drag these down put our new input in, our new output into the gamma. We're using the same texture for the highlights. And we'll have a look at that. And that, there we have it. So there are our midtones. We can change some of these values, like I said, to tweak the bits the way you want to look at it. Like I might not want it so dark over there, so I'm just going to increase it back up to 0.7. In fact, this should be 0.7 as well. So there we have it. We've got our highlights and midtones. Now all we need to do is the shadows. Now I'm going to control drag these again, back down here. This is going to control the gamma. But our input is going to be different. But I'm still going to control drag it down here, get a copy of it. I'm going to switch it to this texture, this hatch. Now, it's you could use any pattern you want for these. It doesn't have to be halftone. You can use any black and white gradient image to map over this. If you want anything cool or slightly quirky. But yeah, and I'll put these textures on our Patreon if you want to have a look. Right. Sorry, I got a bit distracted. Yeah, so we're going to put this in the input. And get this, we've got the hatching now. Pop that into the input there. I don't know if it will attach. And let's have a look. Let's see if we're getting our shadows. There you have it. So we've got those nice cross-hatching pattern going on in the shadows. Okay, so far so good. Now, we need to put these all together. And the best way to do that is using a Redshift color layer, and then we'll drive that color layer into the diffuse of a material. So first things first, let's get our color layer shader so we can start layering up these colors. I mean, if you wanted, you could have each one of these driving a different material. So you might want the cross hatching to be like specular. You might want the cross hatching to be, translucent. You could change it. It could be a mesh light. It could be a luminance shader. So you could do anything really with these. But for the spirit of this, we're just going to make it look as much like Into the Spider-Verse as possible. Right. So let's pop our out color into our output. Now our base color. I'm just going to put a red into it because that's what I'm going to do. So we get a color absolute, and I'm going to put that in our base color. At the moment it's black. We don't want that. We're going to change it to a red. Why is it not updating? Oh, because we've got the layer one. Okay, so our base color is our red. Now we're going to want to have our white. Now since this, if we have a look at it already, is, well, if we inverted this, we can put it into our layer one color, enable it, and change its mode to add. So we can just add these white dots. So if I just invert this gradient, let's just use the color invert, just so it's clear what we're doing. Input, layer one color, we output that. See, we now got the red with these white dots on, with this halftone pattern for the highlights. Nice. So we'll leave that as it is for now. The second thing we're going to do is now we're going to add this, the midtones. And the midtones, I want to be like a darker red, I guess. So I'll grab this, let's lower that color down. Let's put it into layer 2 color. Now, instead of additive or multiplying, actually we could multiply it. Yeah, let's just go with multiply. There might be a cleaner way of doing it. yeah, so let's just use a layer mask. So this output here, so a layer mask for layer 2 and enable layer 2. There we go. And once again, it's the wrong way round. So I'm just going to duplicate this color invert, put it in between, pop it there. Oh, looks like I put it in the wrong one. So there we go. Right, so there we go. Now we've got our extra colors. Saying that, I think I'm going to turn it to multiply, and I'm just going to adjust this so it's less dark. It's a bit dark at the moment. Okay, right, maybe a bit brighter. There we go. Right, and now for the shadows. Now the shadows are going to be easy as well. If you want to tint the shadows, you can do the same process of having a color edit, but all I'm going to do is take straight from this, go to layer 3 color, enable it, multiply it, and there we have it. You've got your cross hatching, nice dark cross hatching. Okay, so that's our color channel sorted. As we can see, if we move just minimize this. If we move this light control, there you go, you can see the hatching and shading all changing with it. Happy with that. Let's open back up our shader graph. Right, so now we're just going to put that, let's get ourselves a material, place this into the color and out the other side. Now at the moment this material is a bit too garish. Our reflection weight is way too high. Increase this roughness, and in fact this color is too intense. We just play around with these. Some diffuse. I might even give this a bit of a reflection. Maybe give it a slight color to shift the hue a bit. There we go. It looks quite aggressive at the moment. That's because my material is still too bright. So I'm going to drop this down a bit more. Maybe a bit more. There you have it. And I think I'm going to darken this so we can see it a bit better. And also change the input of, so the range of these dots to make them a bit larger. There we go. You even get this nice look where they sort of goes into dark and inverts slightly if you go low enough. Don't go too low, otherwise you get this horrible tearing in it. There we go, so we'll stick it like that. Now, for an extra touch, I added this sort of, as you notice, these highlights along these edges. And to do that, I used the round corners thing, which is normally used to make the edges of your object look rounded, like in the bump channel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to get a ramp, pop it here. I'm going to I'll show you what this looks like actually first. So see what, as you can see, that it gives you this cool, which is, I quite like it in itself, round corners texture, and we can adjust the size of it by this radius. Don't need to worry about the samples, I think it's all fine. We can make it just a bit larger. Now we can pop this into a ramp, and we see we pop it when it comes out. you get this like grayscale map. But what I'd like to do is take this down here and change the color. So maybe give it like a nice blue, add in a bit of pink to it, like this. So pop this down here, and you can see, just want to get some different shades into it, and then we'll go back to white, just to make it a bit more interesting, so it's not just a flat color. And I might make it a bit thinner. There we go. So now what we can do is I can take that, whack it into layer 4, turn layer 4 on, and just make it additive. And then we can take that, stick it on here, and there you have it. Got this white outline now. And in fact, it's a bit strong, so I just drop it down a touch till it's nicely visible, but not too visible. And maybe increase the thickness slightly. Right, so that's that. There we have it. There's your halftone shader in Redshift. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. The project files will be available on our Patreon, which is new, so it's quite empty at the moment, but there's a bonus offer for the early birds. Yeah, that's that. If you like this, subscribe, like the video. Hopefully we'll be doing one every 1 to 2 weeks to get started with. See how it goes. If people like it, I'll do more. If they don't, I'll stop. But anyway, this has been me, Alex, and goodbye from the Rook's Nest. Thanks.